Here we go. Okay. Hi, welcome back. I'm Dr. Stephen Criswell, co-director of Native American Studies at USC Lancaster. We are continuing our virtual Native American Studies Week. I do want to start off by thanking Oceana Gold, Hell Gold Mine for support, and USC Lancaster, our Dean Walt Collins, who's joined us here, and the USC Palmetto College as well for their support. Okay. There is, if you look in the chat, at the first entry in the chat, at the bottom of your screen, sorry, there's a cat behind me, at the bottom of your screen, there's a link to our virtual exhibit for Native American Studies Week that features Tom's work as well as Chris Olszewski, who joined us yesterday. So I invite you to check out that exhibit. It looks fantastic. And so now I'm just going to turn this over to the creator of that exhibit and our professor, Brittany Taylor-Driggers. Brittany.
Hey everyone, I'm Brittany Taylor-Driggers. Like Stephen said, I was the curator of the exhibit, and we have Tom Farris with us today, one of the main artists of the exhibit. He's going to talk about his artwork. And the title of this presentation is Humor and Activism, an artist taught by Tom Farris. Tom is an award-winning contemporary artist out of Oklahoma, and he is the curator and manager of Exhibit C, a gallery on the Chickasaw Nation. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him talk more.
She froze. I think I can take it. But welcome. Thank you everybody for showing up. This is way more people than I expected. And that's good because that makes my picture of me really small, so I don't really have to pay attention to it. That's great for me. I am gonna and have a tendency to ramble on, but and if anybody has any questions or comments or anything, I guess just pop them into chat and I will try and kind of keep track and reference those if I see as I see them, I guess. So as Brittany mentioned, I am Tom Farris. I live in Norman, Oklahoma, where University of Oklahoma is located. And I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation and Otoe-Missouria tribes. And I'm the product or the child of two very passionate Native American art collectors. So growing up around Native American art, being dragged to museums and art galleries and artists' houses, I really hated Native American art so much as a kid, around like 11 and 12, but you're never really into what your parents are into when you're that age. But as I got older, I started seeing artwork that had an aesthetic that was more things that I was interested in. It had a little more of a modern take and just was, I guess, just a departure from the traditional idea, I guess, of what people have of Native American artwork. And so from there, at the age of 16, I started collecting artwork too. Which was, again, never anything that I had ever anticipated, which kind of continues along the line. I never thought I would work in Native American art and then never really thought I would be a creator of it. But I've been working as a curator and a gallery owner, manager for about 20 years now. And the way I got into Indian art is by pestering every single Native artist friend of mine to make stuff that I had ideas for, until finally one of them just said, why don't you make it? You figure out how to do it, we'll help you out. And I've had some very generous friends who have been fantastically open with knowledge and helpful, that have really kind of allowed me to figure out ways to execute my kind of random and weird ideas. My artwork has a tendency to utilize humor because that is the way that I kind of deal with people. I have found that confrontation or trying to convey ideas or persuade people, you don't really get very far with just kind of inundating them with things that are counter to their own ideas, or just arguing at them. But if you can make them laugh a little bit, they'll at least consider what you're saying. So I think the best thing maybe to do, and I apologize. I was slightly unprepared for this, but I do have some examples of artwork that I do that kind of might better explain what I do. So I take, and I'm going to share the screen. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, everybody, for my very messy desktop and very slow computer, oddly enough. There we go. So I take ideas and concepts that I encounter and kind of give them a Native American perspective of things. This was a piece that is based on signs that I saw in pretty much every neighborhood I lived in, talking about, slow down, kids live here. Well, I really kind of found them passive aggressively annoying, but took the concept of, wanting the person who had the sign for you to be in their perspective. So apply that to kind of an anti-colonization message. Oh, wait, nope, that's not what I want. And again, I'm also apologizing because I am certainly not the most proficient Zoom person either. Sorry, back to this. As I mentioned, I'm also a member of the Cherokee Nation. And one of the concepts I like to share is our written language. While I was growing up and not into Native artwork, I definitely became enthralled with hip hop music. And I'm a huge product of that growing up in the early 90s hip hop. And so I want to try and incorporate Native American language, specifically Cherokee language as it's written, with graffiti culture. And so I just find that kind of funny just because nobody's ever done it. And it's such an interesting way to represent a language people don't really even know exists as far as a written language, and meaning Cherokee. So this is a pseudo graffiti piece that was based on hip hop lyrics. And it says, "If you don't know, now you know," in Cherokee. And the reason I think it kind of describes how I work is it allows people to encounter Cherokee language or just Native culture in general with something that's somewhat familiar. Another example of that would be this piece here. It's the 1966 Batman logo in Cherokee language. The point of utilizing iconography that people are familiar with is allowing them to come in and connect with the piece and recognize it. And then once they recognize it, they notice something's a little bit different, a little bit off about it, and then they're ready to engage with it. Now, a lot of times for me, that has a tendency to be humor, just because, again, I find that's the best way to bring somebody over to your perspective. And I'm really trying to, fine, okay. I've got one more that I would like to kind of share with you. If I can, again, be a better Zoom person, I apologize. Let's see the chat. Oh, thank you. Sorry. I need to not do that there. So this piece is currently at the Wheelwright Museum. It's one of my larger pieces and kind of how my work is going today, making kind of bigger three-dimensional works out of stuff that already exists. So this piece is called Tools of the Trade. And the entire point of the game, or the theme of the game, is called Manifest Destiny. Settle the country by any means necessary. And is every method used to steal native land appears on the reel of the game. So you've got westward expansion, you've got diseased blankets, treaties, religion, whiskey, the decimation of the bison. All these things that were used to take land from native people appear in this game. and which is the overall theme, but the game itself is how tribes are utilizing gaming to take their land back. But the whole point of the piece is that there really isn't a winner or a loser in this game, which is why it only dispenses the wooden nickels. But that's so many concepts of uncomfortable topics that unless you kind of approach it with an overall humoristic point of view, people probably aren't gonna engage with it, or they won't engage with it as easily. So that's really why I like to kind of incorporate humor into my work. I do really well with questions and feedback, so feel free to pop in. So as I said, I work for the Chickasaw Nation, and one of the things that I realized that I thought was interesting is they're really kind of responsible for me as a person. The first job that I ever had was working for a small museum here in Norman, which got my foot in the door in working in Native artwork. And I only got that job through the Chickasaw Nation as a summer youth employee. And again, at this point in my life, I had no intention of ever going into Native artwork or even working in it, but it was a summer job, so I took it. And I found out I had this kind of weird innate knowledge of Native art just based on growing up with Native artists or Native collectors. And so I had a natural aptitude for it. And come full circle, I worked at that museum, which led to another job and owning a gallery. And now I currently work again for the Chickasaw Nation. So I was very pleased with that. Let's see, we do have chat. Oh, yes, my Indian motorcycles piece. So a lot of the pieces that I utilize, and I apologize, I'm trying to find it here, utilize established iconography of Native Americans. So one of them being an Indian motorcycles logo. And I was trying to see if I even have one here. But let me show you something similar along those lines. I have a series of war clubs. Sorry, I didn't quite catch. Sorry, not that Siri. Okay, so I have a series of war clubs that incorporate vintage Pontiac hood ornaments. And I utilize that for a number of reasons. First of all, I really love woodworking. It's something that I learned from my father. And I always loved the Last Mohican scene with, West Studi, and he's really got that awesome war club. And so I always wanted to make one. And I thought, man, those hood ornaments would really fit the back of that war club perfectly. And so I incorporated them partly because Pontiac is based on an actual leader, which most people are unaware of, who I always find it interesting that a company based in Detroit would name their company after the man who attacked Fort Detroit, which I just find interesting. So Pontiac was a real person. And at this point, most people aren't even aware that it's anything other than a car company. So from the 30s to the 60s, Pontiac had this really awesome series of chrome Indian head hood ornaments. And so I've taken that appropriated Indian image and putting it on actually something that is actually Native American and brought it all full circle. And so it allows people to not only learn that Pontiac was a real person, but it also really kind of reappropriates an appropriated Native image. I've got something similar, if I can get out of this picture. I've always wanted a pedal car when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I was probably too big to even have this pedal car, even then. But I utilized a vintage pedal car and restored it. I put in a Pendleton seat, a light up Pontiac style Indian hood ornament, and retrofitted this to be like the ultimate Indian car, the war pony. I guess full circle, I really have always been a car guy who's also into artwork, and I love being able to bring those two things together: the hood ornaments, the mini car. These are all kind of things that I find that people love and people outside of Indian art love. So they also brings them into appreciating Native culture too. Sorry. I am horrible at following chat and trying to talk. Sorry, everybody. So I'm so lost. I apologize, everybody. I'm kind of lost in space. I've got one more picture that I want to share. So ledger artwork has become kind of a new genre of Native artwork. It's based on historical ledger documents from the 1800s that are that depicted battles or historic moments in tribal history. They were depicted on ledger paper. So I've taken ledger artwork that is, or a ledger style in vintage paper, and taken the idea of what if during one of these battles, you know, the time traveling DeLorean popped in to a raid, and you know somebody just happened to be there to document it as a ledger artist of the day. Again, it's just an example of how I kind of utilize humor and pop culture to allow people to kind of appreciate Native culture and different aspects of it. Great, Scott. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? I just kind of feel like I'm going through the greatest hits of my artwork, which is okay. Do you feel that using humor? Oh, thank you for a question. Do you feel that using humor makes people more receptive to Native art? Yes. So I feel that using humor allows people to approach difficult or uncomfortable subjects that they would normally want to avoid at all costs. You know, Native American genocide, just the termination, boarding schools, all these things that are kind of horrible moments of Native history that people like to avoid. They aren't really taught, but people should know about them. And the best way to do that is to share that information. And I feel the best way to do that is by utilizing humor, because people will then at least talk about it. And you can use those jokes and those open doors to deliver a little bit of a message. And then that person is aware of that, and then they share that, and it moves on and on. Let's see. Have you had any pushback? Oh, yeah, I've had a lot of pushback on pieces in very odd ways. I'm sorry, let me actually read that question. It says, have you had any pushback to any of your pieces, or have any been viewed as controversial? Yes, there is a series of pieces that I do. I have this idea that with everything going paperless, future ledger artists, as I showed, the DeLorean piece was on ledger paper. Future ledger artists won't have paper to work on, and so they won't have anything to work on. So I've started doing ledger artwork on the new ledger, which is a decommissioned hard drive. So they're painted computer hard drives that depict contemporary Native events. Now, I have to say this piece was right around 2017, and I wasn't really super happy with the direction of the election at that time. And I had a piece that depicted a ledger-style native scalping Donald Trump, and that piece was called Impeachment. I happened to have that piece when I did a show at the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C., and it definitely, the vast majority of people really loved it, but there was definite opposition to the piece from very vocal people. But I am happy to say that piece was purchased and now lives in Washington, D.C., and I feel really good about that. And those are the type of things that I enjoy, is that I'm able to convey a message or an opinion, and it is either accepted or it's not, but it's just fun. Oh, and thank you, everybody. I do appreciate okay, you mentioned 90s hip hop era as being an influence. What are some of my other influences? So beyond 90s hip hop, which was a huge influence on me, I am hugely influenced, obviously, by comic books. 1980s pop art is a huge influence on my life, which is kind of directly from comic books. You know, Roy Lichtenstein essentially became a fine artist by making large comic book panels into paintings. And then by extension, Andy Warhol and Patrick Nagel. I really love those artists that have an aesthetic that is that's 1980s. And so since I'm definitely a product of that era, growing up in the 80s, I just identify with that, and there's just a sense of nostalgia that is part of that. So I've definitely produced pieces that were, I've got one here, as I will share in just one second. This is a piece that was based on Patrick Nagel's work. It's called "Oh Yeah," like the song from Ferris Bueller. It's just, I love the aesthetic that it provides. That is such a nostalgic trip to the 80s. But those images were so always empty of native representation. And so I always wanted to take those images and have natives involved. And that's kind of where I steal from those 80s artists and kind of give it a native twist. Do you think your artwork has helped to debunk some pseudosciences that outsiders have about Native American culture and history? I definitely think that my artwork has brought up a lot of uncomfortable, I don't know, can I get a specific on the pseudosciences? I'm not quite sure on that, but I did a series, since we are talking about Roy Lichtenstein, of basically very blonde women who started from the concept of the blonde woman who claims that her grandmother was a Cherokee princess, which is a daily interaction here in Oklahoma. And so I took that idea of that one person and basically kind of created an art meme. I had the woman and a word bubble and 25 different things that every Native person has heard in their life. Can I touch your hair? Do you live in a teepee? Can I take your picture? Do you pay taxes? Do you ride a horse? There's just a whole list of all of these things that, especially me working in a Native field with the public, I mean, it's something that every Native person hears, but when you work with people, you hear it so much more and so often, which is also kind of why I generally lead with the fact that I'm Otoe-Missouria first and Cherokee second, because as if you start with Cherokee, everybody's like, oh, I'm Cherokee too. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. So Someone says, I didn't think Cherokee women had princesses. Well, so they didn't really. That is actually something that they do have now. It's more of like a pageant-based thing, but that is the misconception of people having ancestors that were Cherokee princesses. It just kind of really wasn't a thing. And so that series I found very interesting because they were in a book, and Native people would come up and flip through one by one and laugh and kind of giggle, and then kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, I've heard this one. But what I thought was really interesting was non-Native people would come through and flip through that book and be like, oh yeah, that's me, I've said that, they were able to identify with it, but they weren't necessarily mad about it. So I found that very interesting, that their takeaway wasn't negative. They just thought it was okay to say those things, but they thought they were happy somebody finally said, oh, okay, so maybe these aren't questions we should be asking. So I really enjoyed that series, and I thought it was a great opportunity to utilize humor to kind of convey ideas to people that, hey, maybe you're asking some offensive questions just from the get-go. As an artist, do you ever have times where you don't know what to make next? Yes. And I'm fortunate in that I am able to, this isn't my primary source of income. I don't know very many Native American artists who are full-time artists, so I wouldn't say that is a rarity. But I'm very fortunate that I don't live by my art sales, so I'm able to do things or make pieces that are maybe a little more conceptual, or maybe, I guess, a little less safe. I mean, I could have a really great career just cranking out buffaloes and teepee scenes, which really have no bearing to me as a person, but as the general public would buy them. And there's no judgment on anybody who does do that. I think if that's how you make your living, that's great. But I wanted to take the opportunity that people actually pay attention and look and actually consider what my artwork says. And so I wanted to actually say something. It's very rare that I'm making something just for the aesthetic sake, because honestly, I'm not the best painter. I'm not the best woodworker. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, and I've learned enough to get my concept out. So my pieces generally have a story or a joke or a concept that goes with it, that actually is what people are engaging with, more so than just kind of being something pretty. How can we connect with you on socials? I have a art Facebook page. I know I'm old. It's facebook.com/The Art of Tom Farris. And I have a website also, that's theartoftomfarris.com. Thank you for asking, that's great. So I'm trying to get back, there was another thing. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting back up to a previous question about misconceptions. So I was very fortunate to be part of a show that identified Native American stereotypes. It's called Savages and Princesses. It's currently touring. I believe it's here in Oklahoma now, at Seminole College. But it's a show done by a group of artists that were really awesome about making humorous pieces that identified Native stereotypes. And so for a few of mine, I did some obvious ones. I took a copy of the Dawes Rolls, which is the list of people that you have to be related to in order to prove that you're a member of the Cherokee Nation, Chickasaws, Creeks, Seminoles, or Choctaws. And so inside this book, on the page where my ancestors were, I painted a Roy Lichtenstein style blonde girl saying, I'm part Cherokee but can't prove it. And that, to me, was the biggest stereotype and misconception that people have, is that, you know, there's so many people who have grandmothers who are Cherokee princesses. But the one that I did that most of the Native American people really loved was a kind of internal stereotype that most outside people weren't aware of, is that I have what was called a native razor, and it was a pair of pliers, or a pair of tweezers, because as you can see, natives don't really grow facial hair very well, and so you don't really need much of a razor. It had zero blade technology, which was my humorous twist on the razors that you buy today. Aside from that, I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I've got another project that we are actually, I'm working with a group of folks that you had there in South Carolina. And if I can figure out how to use my computer, there. So as I said, I'm a huge fan of comic books. And so we are working with a group of other Native artists to tell scary Native stories in a vintage horror comic style. This piece was done on vintage ledger paper and tales from the res. So I really love Native mythology, or Native stories, because people don't like to call it mythology. And my mother just really tortured me as a kid with a story of Deer Woman. And so she is a really common character in a lot of the pieces I do. For those who don't know, Deer Woman is this captivatingly beautiful woman. You never take your eyes off her face, and she will go to social gatherings, and she will lure men, you know, goofy men, away from the crowd, away from the fire, out into the woods. And since you've never looked away from her face, you don't realize that she has deer hooves for feet. And so she stomps you to death. Basically, it's a don't go off with strangers, and specifically strange women story. So it was one of those stories that my mother told me 1,000 times because she, you know, didn't want me running off with people. But I really loved that story, and I was surprised at how common of a story it was for Native people, but outside of Native communities, nobody was really familiar with it. So I really love the opportunity to share those traditional stories that we all grew up with non-Native audiences. And so that piece was always gonna be kind of near and dear to my heart. So we are trying to tell those stories in a Native comic and produce it. And so hopefully we'll have that soon. It is a very long and arduous process. Another piece that you guys had on hand there was one that I have, I've had people ask about before. So I found the idea that Native artists are the only minority group out there that has to prove that who they are or what their culture is in order to participate or even be called a Native American artist. They're called CDIB cards, a certified degree of Indian blood. And I tell people about that, and they're like, oh, well, you don't still have to do that, do you? And I was like, yes, we still have to do that. I have them myself. And so just the idea that we still have to do it, and two, that people kind of think it's an arcane idea and are surprised when they find out they still exist. So I thought it would be interesting what if other cultures or races had to do that? And so these are all larger versions of a CDIB card for each different race. So there's tribal identities for white people, or for Asians, or Hispanic, all kinds of the different races based on what their tribal identity would have been in their home country. And then I utilized names and dates that were relevant to each one of those cultures, and tied it up into interesting little presentation. I've got some more folks here. Let's see. Sorry. There's a parallel to Latin oral tradition, the devil at the dance. Oh, that's very cool. So I actually kind of have a question because I had heard, and this is something since someone brought up Latinx or Latinx. Is that the preferred nomenclature? Because I've used it off and on, but I've heard that people who are actually Hispanic or Latin, they don't really like it.
Yeah, I was using that. That actually comes from my millennial daughter who has corrected me. So
Right.
I tend to go with her terms because she's 24 and that's cancel culture, and I don't want to get canceled.
Well, and so I didn't know if there was anybody who actually of Latin descent who would comment, because I've asked my friends, and they're just like, no, that's not. I think honestly, for me, I feel like it's they keep coming up with different names for Indians, Native Americans, now First Americans. None of those are right, and none of those are correct. They're all interchangeable, and it's really because we're a tribal people. We maintain a tribal identity, and so we don't have this mass minority identity. And so as far as terminology for that kind of thing, it doesn't bother me because it's always going to be incorrect on some level.
Yeah, I was referring to the devil at the dance story is sort of border, U.S. border in Mexico, and kind of crosses the border, but it tends to be among Latino, Latina, Latin. I like Latinx, but that's not how you say it.
So it's one of the things that I've started to work into the nomenclature, but I was like, I've also, from my friends who I've said that to that are Hispanic, they're like, don't do that's no. I didn't know if there was somebody here who could actually give a little more insight into that. That's just my own personal thing, and the more you know, and the more you learn. So, are there any other questions? Let's see. Some people like, okay. Okay. So, I think I have one other piece to show you. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, okay. So I apologize. Again, this is just kind of what I have at my disposal. I am Otoe-Missouria on my mother's side. We are Buffalo Clan, and my name in my Otoe-Missouria name is Chidonehe, which means standing buffalo. So there's a lot of buffaloes, a lot of wolves, because my dad's Wolf Clan in my house. So I've always been kind of taken with language, as we've discussed. But this one's an English one that I really love. This is the longest longest sentence that you can make using a single word in the English language. And it's just repeating buffalo over and over again. And again, it's one of those little trivial knowledge things that I find interesting, and I just like sharing. It's a a non-native story that I get to share, and it's just very kind of relevant to myself because I'm native in Buffalo. I think those are all the pieces that we're actually at your location. Oh, thank you. Someone said that piece is one of their favorites. One of the things that, besides humor, that I do like to include in my work are definitely pop culture references. You've seen the Batman piece. I've got a Superman piece, or several Superman pieces. My latest thing has been making Native American fans with out of lightsaber handles, which is just the nerd part of me coming out. And it's let me put this up there. This was the latest one. I don't think you guys had this one, but it's an all white fan that when you turn it on, the center feather lights up red, and the handle is a custom made lightsaber handle. It's not exactly humor, it's just kind of my nerdiness. And one of the things that I've always loved is Star Wars. And so I want to incorporate it as much into Native art as possible, as I'm certainly not the only one who's done. I think Native people really love Star Wars just because they identify with the rebels and that kind of underdog, we're gonna beat the evil empire spirit. I honestly, it's one of those things that I identify with now, just seeing how far Native sovereignty has come and seeing that long fight finally paying off. I'm sorry. I'm reading. Let's see. I joined late. Tell us about the piece you did. Oh, the haircut. Okay. Sorry. So someone asked again, tell us about the piece you did where the Native person is giving Donald Trump a haircut. Does it have a new meaning after Wisconsin and Arizona contributed to his dethroning there? Absolutely. I've always loved that piece, and it's just one in a series of contemporary events that I've captured. I've got one about the Dakota Access Pipeline, one about the Columbus statues coming down, one about Oklahoma finally being recognized as Indian territory still. So all of these things that what I believe are going to be the contemporary historical moments for Native people captured on contemporary ledger art. So yeah, as I said before, it was a ledger style person giving a ledger style Donald Trump a scalping. So do I have, yes, it has new meaning after Wisconsin and Arizona, because I really love the fact that Arizona, if you compare the map of counties that reported for Biden, counties that reported that were Native counties, they match up almost perfectly. And 97% of Native folks in Arizona voted for Biden. I think that is probably the first time Native people were recognized for their political value. And I think, having, representatives like Deb Haaland in office have helped us immensely. Representation, I think, is important. Everybody recognizes that. I think that the more we are seen as a contemporary and thriving culture, the more we'll be considered in, contemporary ideas. And so, yes, that piece I think is extra special now because they directly contributed to his literal scalping in this election, and that's fantastic. Is your friend behind you also an artist? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize my dog snuck in. Yes, that he specializes in making trash sculptures, but yeah, sorry, I didn't even recognize him coming in. So let's see. I'm sorry, I thought I missed one other questions for those true. Oh. Okay. My latest, I think, pieces are for utilizing humor once again. A show that I've been invited to in Ireland and Scotland that are about Native artists with Scottish and Irish roots as well. On my dad's side, he's got Scotch, and my mother's side, British, and then the natives. So we have kind of this weird UK native conglomeration here. But I realized that in preparing these pieces that I really had no idea at all about my Scottish heritage. I know a lot about my British heritage, but I had so much fun researching it and made some pieces that really reflected that. But I really wanted to make a piece that honored my complete ignorance and also kind of the perspective of my only representation of Scottish culture was from movies and TV, so much like Native American culture is for the majority of people and how stereotypes exist and are perpetuated. And so I made a light up neon sign that it was translated into Cherokee that says "There can be only one," which is the only bit of Scottish reference, which was from the Highlander, the movie, which is another nerd reference. But that to me, I really wanted to kind of take that perspective of the person that is completely ignorant other than what is represented in movies, because I feel like that is so often how Native people are characterized, or referenced, or even thought of. So I really enjoyed doing that piece. It was uh, as I said, that's kind of where my work is going now, larger, less painting and more making stuff. Um, what I'm currently working on is a car, an art car. It's the piece will be called Shifting Paradigms, literally because it's a car shifting. And it's about perception of Native people from the outside, to our own personal representation and how we see ourselves, represented on different halves of a car. And so to me, that's really where I'm going as far as an artist, because I find value in creating pieces like that, because I've learned so much in making this faux neon sign. I've learned so much in building this car. I'm creating artwork, but also gaining just knowledge and skill. And I really kind of enjoy the secondhand benefit of doing that and making things that way. Kind of started with the pedal car, and then the slot machine and the neon. So things are just progressively getting bigger. I don't know. I'll have to do a full-on installation next, I guess. But let's see. I've got a question here. Has coronavirus and quarantining affected your recent work? So I can say this. I am, and also going back to the question of, is there ever a moment where you don't know what to make? I'm definitely a person who works very well under deadline. And that's when inspiration hits, like a week out from something that's due, I'll have, an idea for something I should have done 6 months ago, because it's going to take that long. But I like the challenge of trying to pull things off in the last minute. But yes, coronavirus has affected my work because of that. Every major market in the country didn't happen this year. They've had virtual versions of it, and they've made some attempts to keep Native art in the in relevance, but they've had varying degrees of success. But I haven't had anything where I knew that I needed to create this major piece of work for competition, or create a bunch of inventory just to have on hand. And so knowing that I don't have those deadlines hanging over my head, it's definitely reduced the amount of work that I've created, but also I think improved the quality, or the ideas, the concepts are better. Because it's a few choice things, as opposed to like, I've got to get all this stuff done because I've got to have X amount for this show. And so it's not as artificial. There's a lot more stuff that is just like, I really want to make this. And I think that's great. It's given me the opportunity to do something like build a car. And I think that's going to be an interesting piece when it's done. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it. It said, it's really interesting that we have had two Native artists yesterday and today who don't know each other, both working on cars and car associated materials. Is there something up with that? I can tell you, for me, I'm a car guy. When I was in my 20s, that was what I was working on my car. Making it faster, making it pretty, whatever, because I had no money, but I had a whole lot of time and a whole lot of desire to work. And so I had the time to do it. But as my dad very rightly pointed out, that there came a day when I had more money than time. And so I pay to have a great working car. I've always had a car that that functions. I didn't have to worry about it not functioning because I paid a car, note every month. But that also isn't as fun. I mean, I haven't had a car that I felt comfortable really digging into and painting right on it, or taking it apart because I was worried about a warranty. I haven't had that in a really long time. So it's a project that I've wanted for a long time, and the right situation came about where I was looking for a very specific car. It was a very specific project, and I just found the right thing at the right time. I will say the idea to actually make it into an art project definitely came from Rose Simpson. She has that amazing El Camino piece. Yes, Road Trip. And it's currently at the Philbrook Museum here in Tulsa. It's called Maria. It's a black El Camino with designs that were based on Maria Martinez pottery on it. And so I definitely was like, wow, that's awesome. She took her daily car, she built it, and she customized it to make it into a piece of artwork. And that, I don't think she's had that car since she finished it because it's been traveling around to shows. And so that's kind of where that idea came from. I was like, oh, that's a whole new thing we can do, is we can take cars and make them art pieces. So with that little bit of, I guess, permission, I mean, Rose was like, yeah, why don't you do that? And so I was like, okay, I want to try one too. It's allowed me to do two things that I love. I love messing with cars. I love making native artwork. And so that's what I'm really happy with. And again, I get that incidental learning. I've literally rebuilt the front end on this vehicle, and I'm really excited for it. It's going to be kind of a long process, but I can't wait to see it. Let's see. I've got one other piece that I just had someone ask about. So I've always made ball-headed work clubs, as we've seen with the Pontiac hood ornaments. Again, it's woodworking that I learned from my dad, and I really enjoy doing because it gives me an opportunity to kind of invade his shop and spend time with him, and really pick up things. Just watching somebody who's a master at what they do, that's how I learned woodworking. Watching Marwin Begay do silk screening, that's how I learned printmaking. I really try to surround myself with people who are amazing at what they do and learn from them. So I also take those skills and do things that they probably really hate. And I know, I've made things that my dad doesn't, really love. And I have a piece that I made because, again, I'm a huge pop culture fan. And I absolutely love The Shining. And I wanted to make this really cool war club based on Jack Nicholson's character from The Shining. It is a handmade rifle stock war club that is from the moment that Jack breaks through the wall or through the door in the movie. I just kind of figured that it's as close to an axe as a native person is going to get. And I really just have always been such a huge Kubrick fan. And that movie is one of my favorites. It's got so much referential material to native culture in it. And if you believe the theories, there's an allegory to the native genocide based in the movie, but that's just a fun piece that I always wanted to do. And it's one that my dad absolutely hates because he's just like, I let you make these beautiful things and then you paint this crazy stuff on it. He doesn't understand it. But, that's also, again, that goes back to my having the ability to not have to worry about selling that piece. If I really was making that strictly for profit's sake, I would have, made it far more traditional. It would have, had, brass tacks and, tasteful leather wrapping, and it would have looked like a million others. But I want to make something weird and something that references something that I absolutely grew up adoring. So that's really what my artwork does, is it kind of pays homage to what I love, and it kind of helps me perpetuate the crazy ideas I have and tell Native stories and Native language and history. That's kind of what I do. And hopefully people enjoy it. And if not, that's fine. But hopefully we can have a discussion about why. And hopefully that discussion leads towards changing perspectives. So I'm in all, I'm an optimist about things, I guess. So, okay. I don't know if we're about done or if I've got questions. Anybody else?
We'll see if anybody has any more questions.
As I said, I have a tendency to ramble. Sorry, guys.
So I'm looking for raised hands. If there's any raised hands or anything in the chat.
No?
Let's see, I think. Well, I will again mention that the exhibit with Tom's work and Chris from yesterday is up. It's the first entry in the chat if you want to scroll back there and click on it. It's a wonderful online exhibit, looks great. We're looking forward to showing your work back in the center in person as soon as we can. But I want to thank you for your talk and for joining us. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow evening at 7. You'll be doing an interactive painting. Can you say a few words about that? Or I'm just curious how that's.
That's one of those that I really like to do live paints in the moment. I kind of want to figure out what I'm going to paint. From what I've read, there's going to be some interaction as far as, I don't know, maybe giving ideas or colors, or I'm not really sure how it'll go. We're going to have some fun with it. I've done a few of these on Zoom, and we have fun. So if you really, what it is, it's a good opportunity for people to kind of see how an artist actually works. And I use that term very loosely. An artist actually works. I'm gonna push some paint around, and hopefully we'll get a clear picture at the end.
It sounds great. It sounds like fun.
It'll be fun.
Great. Well, and I want to thank my colleague Brittany Taylor-Driggers for helping to set this up, and Elizabeth Streeter and Ashley Laumore, Katie Scholl, the folks here at the center who've helped us. And we'll see you again tomorrow at 7. I hope everybody who's here now can join us and bring a friend or an enemy, whoever you want to bring. But I think that's it. Any last words? Anybody else have anything they would like to share? You're getting lost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know. I'm sorry, Brady, go ahead.
No, I was just going to thank Tom. Thank you so much. And I thought it was great. And especially from the comments that in the chat, I mean, everyone's enjoying it too. So it was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. It says somebody has their hand raised. I don't know.
Oh,
Is there a question? Or
yeah, if you have a question, just unmute your mic and ask it. Oh, Penelope, let's see, where are you?
If you could like,
Oh.
wait, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
You're fine. Thank you all for having me. Honestly, I love, first of all, I'm just happy to get to interact with other people. That's probably been the one thing from quarantine that's been annoying, but it is good to see other people interact. And thank you all for coming and listening. And definitely check in tomorrow night. It should be a fun time.
All right, great. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Bye, Courtney.
Hey, see you later.
See ya. I'm waiting for everyone to leave.
Everybody you don't have to go home.
I can't stand up. I'm not wearing pants. So yeah.
You know, nobody is anymore. Pants are done. The whole pant industry has collapsed.
Handshaking, pants wearing.
No, it's done.
But I'm good with these. I'm good with it. I don't like shaking hands and touching people, and I don't like wearing pants. Because I like wearing pants and did like touching people. That would be a problem. Damn it, I forgot I'm recording this. Okay. See you later.
See you later.
Bye, Brent. Good to see you too. All right, well, you're mute, so all right, I think I can stop this now. I'm just gonna find the right button. End. Oh, wait, stop recording.